What started as a routine late-night interview turned into one of the most explosive on-air meltdowns in talk show history. Tensions boiled, lines were crossed, and by the end, one of America's most controversial figures stormed off live TV, humiliated, furious, and vowing revenge. The Tonight Show had seen its fair share of uncomfortable interviews and unscripted moments, but nothing in its decades-long run had ever approached the sheer volatility of what unfolded when Donald Trump walked on the stage that evening. From the moment he stepped under the bright studio lights, something was off. The applause was delayed, scattered even, as if the audience sensed something sinister brewing beneath the surface. Jimmy Fallon, ever the grinning MC, opened with his usual charm. Light jokes, a fake laugh or two, and a hint of mockery hidden behind each compliment. But beneath his cheerful exterior, there was a tension, an edge in his voice that hadn't gone unnoticed by the producers. Tonight wasn't just another interview. Fallon had a plan. The initial few minutes played out like any other interview. Trump, confidently perched in the guest chair, was basking in the spotlight, tossing out quips and veiled jabs about the current administration. He was no stranger to hostile territory, and Fallon had interviewed him before, though never like this. Then, without warning, Fallon pivoted. The smile dropped from his face with calculated precision. His tone shifted from playful to pointed. He launched into a scathing accusation, claiming that an unreleased recording had surfaced, allegedly, capturing Trump at a private golf club making wildly inappropriate comments about a biracial family dining nearby. Fallon claimed to have credible sources confirming Trump referred to the couple as a bad example of American values. The audience gasped. The room went cold. Trump's face hardened. He laughed at first, assuming it was a bit, some kind of tasteless setup for a punchline. But Fallon wasn't joking. The host leaned in, voice lowered, eyes locked, hammering home the accusation with a calmness that felt more like a blade than a question. Fallon was no longer playing to the crowd. He was playing for blood. Trump's response was measured at first, almost rehearsed. He denied it, dismissed it as fiction, then redirected to his usual talking points about the media's bias. But Fallon pressed on, weaving in insinuations about Trump's past legal troubles, invoking old lawsuits, interviews, and tweets. The crowd, now a mix of silence and awkward chuckles, was torn between disbelief and fascination. Then Trump did something unexpected. He went on the offensive. He began recounting an incident from Fallon's past, an off-camera moment, he claimed, during a commercial break years ago. According to Trump, Fallon had made crude impersonations of foreign dignitaries and joked about needing to sanitize the seat after a black guest had left. Trump even accused Fallon of calling certain celebrities PR stunts for diversity points when the cameras weren't rolling. The air in the studio shifted. Fallon's smugness cracked. The audience's loyalty wavered. It was no longer clear who was in control. Fallon tried to cut to commercial, but Trump ignored the cue, doubling down, listing names, mimicking Fallon's voice, and painting a picture of a host who had carefully hidden his bigotry behind a curtain of laughter and liberalism. The producers were scrambling, the teleprompter went dark, and the control room was a frenzy of red lights and panicked whispers. This wasn't just a messy interview, it was a PR nightmare unfolding in real time. Fallon stood his ground, but his responses were defensive now. His voice trembled slightly. For the first time in years, the king of late night was being dragged into the mud by the very guest he tried to bury. The audience, sensing the unraveling, was glued to every word. Fallon, perhaps desperate to reclaim control, made a final push, bringing up the Central Park Five and accusing Trump of using racially charged fear tactics to build his political brand. He pointed to the full-page ads, the press conferences, the refusal to apologize. Trump's eyes narrowed. The jovial facade was gone. He leaned forward, slow and deliberate, and spoke so forcefully that even those in the back row could feel the air shift. He referenced Fallon's personal life, painfully specific details about his divorce, rumors of backstage drinking, and an alleged outburst at an intern that had been quietly swept under the rug. The crowd turned. Fallon, for all his charm and charisma, was visibly rattled. The two men were no longer speaking to each other. They were battling for the narrative. The show had become a war zone, and the audience were hostages. What had started as late-night entertainment had morphed into a public unmasking. Fallon's team tried to salvage the interview. One producer even whispered in Fallon's ear, urging him to wrap it, but he waved them off. His pride wouldn't allow a retreat. Just when it seemed the worst had passed, Trump delivered the final blow. A folder. Pulled from beneath his chair, he claimed it contained sworn affidavits, screenshots, and testimonies. Statements from former Tonight Show employees, alleging racial insensitivity and toxic workplace behavior. He held it up, just out of reach, taunting the cameras with it. The room erupted. Fallon lunged forward, demanding it be put away. The crew swarmed the stage. Security hovered. The audience's gasps blended into a chaotic hum, and Trump, stone-faced, triumphant, rose from his seat. But he wasn't done yet. He turned to the crowd slowly, taking in the silence, and made a cutting remark about Fallon's fake moral high ground and America's obsession with forgiving the wrong people. Then he tossed the folder on the desk with a smirk and stormed off the stage, leaving behind a host who was suddenly very human, very fallible, and very alone. The camera stayed on Fallon as he sat frozen, one hand on the desk, the other trembling, just enough to be noticed. No jokes, no music, just silence, and that folder, sitting there like a ticking bomb. But what was really inside it? And could Fallon survive what was about to be revealed next? The folder sat on the desk like a live wire. No one touched it. Not Jimmy, not the stagehands, not the producers scrambling behind the scenes to cut to commercial or run credits. It remained there, heavy, radioactive, its very presence stretching the silence into something unbearable. Fallon stared at it. His fingers twitched, hovering just inches from the cover. 1,000 thoughts blurred in his mind. Was it a bluff? Some doctored nonsense Trump had whipped up to distract from the racist accusations? Or worse, was there truth in it? Before he could decide, his earpiece crackled. The voice of the executive producer, sharp and urgent. "Do not open it. We're pulling the show. Get off air, now." But Fallon didn't move. He couldn't. For the first time in years, he was no longer in control of the narrative. The show had detonated in his hands, and now, live or not, the world was watching. He knew it. Trump knew it. And somewhere, across the internet, the clips were already going viral. The cameras kept rolling. One of the crew tried to step in, to snatch the folder and bring the evening to a merciful end, but Fallon raised a hand and dismissed him without a word. The crowd sat silent, barely breathing. The upbeat set, designed for harmless banter and games, now felt like the scene of a crime. Then Fallon finally reached forward. He opened the folder. Inside, a carefully arranged pile of printed emails, screenshots, and typed statements. At the top, a bold heading: Testimonies of former NBC employees. Fallon's face tightened as he scanned the contents. Accusations of inappropriate jokes, comments about race, gender, and mental health, descriptions of a boys' club culture, behind the scenes, statements claiming Fallon mocked foreign accents during rehearsals, even one allegation that a black writer had been quietly let go after calling out insensitive content, allegedly at Fallon's behest. He flipped through the pages faster, looking for anything that could be disproven, anything fake. But the signatures, the dates, the email headers, they looked terrifyingly real. His stomach sank. From the back of the studio, someone shouted. It was a woman, clearly shaken. A former staffer? Security moved to hush her, but the damage was done. The audience erupted. Whispers turned to murmurs, then to outright discussion. Fallon stood there, mouth dry, watching the illusion collapse around him. Across social media, hashtags had already begun trending. Fallon exposed. Tonight show meltdown, Fallon vs. Trump. NBC's legal team was on the line. The network was hemorrhaging control, and Fallon knew what came next. He had seen this story play out before, just not from the inside, but something in him snapped. He straightened his shoulders, pushed the folder aside, and looked directly into the camera. He began to speak, not the cheerful host voice, but something rawer. He addressed the accusations, denied some, admitted others weren't entirely inaccurate, and spoke about a culture of comedy that often blurred the lines of appropriateness. He talked about change, growth, the industry's shifting standards. It was supposed to be a redemption pivot, a calculated move to reclaim some moral high ground. But the audience didn't applaud. They just watched, unsatisfied. And then, without warning, the studio doors creaked open again. Trump had returned. He strode in like a general surveying the battlefield he had already conquered. Still off mic, still furious, but visibly emboldened. He didn't go back to the chair. Instead, he stood at the edge of the stage, arms crossed, looking at Fallon like a man who had just toppled a monument. Fallon looked back, stunned. Trump pointed at the folder, then at Fallon. His voice cut through the tension, booming even without amplification. He accused Fallon of hiding behind woke masks and fake apologies, of treating politics like a costume party while real lives were being destroyed. He brought up Fallon's past skits, his softball interviews with powerful men, and how he had laughed through scandals that devastated real communities. The tension skyrocketed. Fallon stepped forward, now visibly defensive. His face was flushed, his movements erratic. He accused Trump of hypocrisy, of bringing destruction to the country, of weaponizing outrage while ducking accountability for his own crimes. He jabbed the air, calling Trump a demagogue, a racist, a media manipulator. But Trump didn't flinch. Instead, he laughed, cold and slow. Then, with calculated venom, he announced that 3 of the people who had contributed to that folder had already signed NDAs with NBC, and yet they'd come forward anyway. He said the real story wasn't about him. It was about how many bodies Fallon had stepped over to get where he was. Then came the real blow. Trump teased the existence of a recording, audio from Fallon's green room, leaked just days before, in which Fallon had allegedly made fun of a Latin American guest's accent. Fallon's face froze. He knew exactly what Trump was talking about. And worse, he knew it existed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. The energy in the room twisted into something ugly. People didn't know who to believe anymore. Fallon, the darling of late-night TV, now stood accused of the very bigotry he had built a career mocking, and Trump, once the target of Fallon's moral performance, was now holding the smoking gun. The production team screamed into Fallon's earpiece, "End the show, now. Go to black," but Fallon didn't listen. He leaned over the desk, fists clenched, and asked Trump to leave. Demanded it, in fact. Told him he wasn't welcome on the stage anymore. The audience clapped, lightly, but it felt forced. Trump stared him down. Then, without another word, he turned toward the audience. With eerie calm, he thanked the people for listening, told them the truth always finds a way to the surface, and dropped one final warning. This isn't over. Not even close. Then, slowly, he walked off the stage, this time for good. Fallon didn't speak. He didn't move. The credits rolled over a dead, silent room. But the damage had already been done. And as the world waited for the leaked audio to surface, one question echoed across every screen, Every timeline, every headline had, "Jimmy Fallon just lost everything?" The morning after was nothing short of an earthquake. The Tonight Show's studio, once a glittering hub of celebrity charm and carefully curated laughter, now looked more like a war zone. The cameras were off. The seats were empty. The laughter signs had been shut down indefinitely. NBC had halted all reruns of the show. Fallon's name, once plastered across billboards and thumbnails, was now buried under a tsunami of headlines, scandal recaps, and think pieces dissecting his downfall. In frame-by-frame slow motion, the leaked green room audio surfaced within hours. Fallon's voice, unmistakably his, could be heard mocking the accent of a Colombian actress who had appeared on the show just weeks prior. It wasn't a joke made in passing. It was cruel, blunt, and worst of all, followed by a burst of laughter that revealed others had heard it too. The backlash was immediate. Viewers turned, colleagues distanced themselves. Comedians who once owed their first big break to Fallon began posting vague statements about reckonings in comedy and toxic environments in late night. Former writers and crew came forward. Some defended him, calling it a hit job. Others confirmed what Trump had hinted at. There had been cracks in Fallon's carefully built facade for years. NBC, under immense public pressure, issued a statement. By noon, they were suspending production, indefinitely pending internal review. Everyone knew what that meant. Fallon was done. For days, he disappeared from public view. Paparazzi stalked his townhouse. Rumors circulated. Rehab, isolation, an impending lawsuit. Social media turned him into a meme, a punchline, and a cautionary tale all at once. Overnight, he had gone from America's quirky funny man to the centerpiece of a cultural reckoning. And Trump? He reveled in it. Clips of his walk-off moment played in a loop across conservative media. Pundits called it the greatest live TV reversal in modern history. Trump had turned an ambush into a standing ovation. His approval ratings among his base surged. He appeared on multiple shows the following week, always referencing the Fallon fallout, with a smug glint in his eye. But then something shifted. Amidst the ruin, Fallon emerged. Not through an interview, not through a press release, but via a somber, self-filmed message, uploaded straight to his dormant YouTube channel. No suit, no set. Just him in a dimly lit room, face raw, eyes heavy. He didn't deflect. He didn't spin. He acknowledged everything. The voice on the audio was his. The jokes were real. He admitted he had hidden behind sarcasm and social camouflage, that his brand of comedy had long avoided true accountability, cloaked in smiles and irony. He admitted the industry enabled it, but also that he had let it happen. He apologized directly to the people he had mocked, named them, thanked those who had spoken up, even those who had attacked him. But what hit hardest was what came next. He revealed that, 3 years ago, he had nearly walked away from the show after suffering a panic attack during a live taping. That the weight of maintaining the image, the late-night cheerleader for a broken culture, had slowly hollowed him out. That he had lost touch with what he actually stood for. The confession was quiet. It wasn't a bid for redemption. It felt like surrender. But people listened. For once, Fallon wasn't trying to make anyone laugh. He wasn't hiding behind clever segues or big-name guests. He was just Jimmy. And that did something. The comments began as expected, harsh, accusatory, skeptical. But then came the nuance. The people who spoke not to excuse him, but to reflect. People who saw in Fallon not a villain, but a mirror. Messages from fans, Black, Latino, Asian, who admitted to once idolizing him, then watching that trust unravel. Some forgave him, others didn't. But many acknowledged something rare. He had faced it. All of it. A week passed. Then NBC confirmed Fallon had resigned from The Tonight Show. They aired a final tribute episode, hosted not by Fallon, but by a rotating cast of former guests and comedians. It was half tribute, half eulogy. There was laughter. There were tears. But no Fallon. He had chosen not to return to the stage. His name would not be engraved on a legacy wall or framed in a hallway. His image was being replaced by a new host the network had yet to announce. But Fallon's story wasn't over. A few months later, he reappeared in a podcast, a small, independently produced show focused on mental health in the entertainment industry. He spoke not as a star, but as a survivor. He talked about ego, silence, shame, about the comedy world's dirty little secrets and the need for real accountability, not just for the headlines, but for the people behind them. And Trump? His victory lap eventually slowed. His moment in the spotlight, though dramatic, became just another bullet point in his long and chaotic history of public spectacles. Some accused him of orchestrating the entire thing as revenge. Others hailed him as the one who finally exposed the hypocrisy of Hollywood. He kept referencing the Fallon incident in speeches, but the more he leaned on it, the more obvious it became. The moment had passed. He hadn't destroyed Fallon's legacy. Fallon had done that himself. Still, Trump had walked away unscathed, triumphant even, but not changed. Fallon, on the other hand, was transformed. He relocated to upstate New York, away from cameras, crowds, and noise. He began volunteering at local art centers, mentoring young comedians, especially those from marginalized backgrounds. He funded scholarships under pseudonyms, quietly, anonymously. No cameras, no press. He would never return to TV, but his story lived on, not as the fall of a giant, but as a cautionary tale with a rare human ending, not wrapped in applause or redemption arcs, but in something more powerful: accountability. The Tonight Show moved on. The industry moved on. The culture, forever hungry for new villains and heroes, set its eyes on the next scandal. But the image of that night, the folder on the desk, the silent stare down, the storm that followed, was carved into late-night history. One man stormed off the stage in righteous fury. Another man stayed and unraveled. And when the dust finally settled, the question wasn't who won. It was who walked away truly changed. The answer, in the end, was undeniable: Jimmy Fallon.